Welcome to For the Church, a podcast for the flock of Zion Presbyterian Church in Columbia, Tennessee. We want to help you think biblically about everyday matters. Zion Church exists to join Jesus and his mission to reach people with the gospel and then to equip his people to worship and serve. I'm your host, Keaton Paul, and joining me is my conversation partner and co-host, Seth Scruggs. Few things are more important to the Christian life than worship. In fact, worship in some capacity is why we get out of bed every morning. Yet, the Bible takes worship incredibly seriously. How we relate to God is vital for us to think through. So in this season, we're asking the question, why should Christians worship and why should we relate to God? How is it that God has called us to come and worship him? So we've thought through a variety of different aspects, specifically of Zion's worship. But today, we'll have a little bonus episode, if you will. But before we get to that, hey, Seth, how are you?
I'm doing good. It's been a good week so far, and we have a friend.
We have a friend. So with that, let's let's just turn the table real quick. Our special guest today, and the treat that is this episode, is that we're interviewing our dear friend, Logan Peck. Hey, Logan.
Hey. I'm good. How are you doing?
Man, we are doing great. We're so glad to have you. And so we've invited Logan on to the podcast to share with us a variety of things. But namely because of who Logan is and some of Logan's background, we're gonna learn all kinds of stuff about worship. But first and foremost, who is Logan Peck?
Oh, wow. Well, first of all, thanks for having me.
Yes.
And second of all, for anyone listening, I am wearing a mask because I've been a little bit under the weather. So if this podcast sounds like a press conference circa the year of our Lord 2020,
Oh no,
then it's because I'm wearing a mask, and I just didn't want anybody to be infected. But I am a Christian man. I live in Columbia, Tennessee, and originally I'm from Cleveland, Ohio. Nice. And my family, especially my mom's side of the family, is very musical, and so we moved here for that reason. My mom's a songwriter, and Nashville obviously is the place where songwriters come, and so she started getting her first recordings and first publishing and all that kind of stuff when we lived in Ohio. And so we moved down here when I was a kid in 1999. And so I've just grown up like in a studio and in songwriting. And it's just been part of my blood essentially. And I've kind of adopted that as well as, and made it my own, as opposed to, just turning the other way and deciding that, it's not really for me. I've just decided to be a part of that. And so particularly writing for the church and writing for Christendom, I guess is one way you could say it, is just something that I have done since probably mid to late teen years, but then have been around for my entire life. So
that's fantastic. So before we're going to get into a lot of that, but before we get there, you're married.
I am.
And that's a pretty cool story.
Yes. You want to know the whole story?
We want to know the whole story.
Okay.
Because music pertains, right?
Sort of. Yeah. Yeah. So my wife, Lexi, the two of us, we went here to Zion Christian Academy. And so if you're wondering if Zion Christian Academy is cool, yes, it is.
Yes, it is.
And so we met each other here, and basically started a little band for chapel. Nobody had ever really done that before, but there was a kid who played drums who wanted to do it, and so he pegged me to be part of it. And so we started having like practices, and there was this guy who Lexi had a crush on, who she started coming to band rehearsals with us. And so I was a better guitar player than he was. And he was better looking than me, no doubt.
But the guitar playing
But
won out.
yeah, I mean, it is what it is. So we we hit it off. We've been dating since like we were young kids, and then got married young as well. I was 20 and she was 18, almost 19. Kind of, she was through her first year of college, um, and yeah, just pretty much have done the music thing through that. And we have 4 children, 4 sons. They didn't come along until later, and we put them out pretty quickly. So they're all very close in age and very young.
There was a time where y'all had 4 under the age of 4.
Yes,
right?
that's right.
That's amazing.
The day that our oldest turned 3.5 is the same day that our youngest was born. So
unbelievable.
Yeah.
4 under 3.5.
So let me zoom in on the worship side of that. You've been leading worship then for like 15 years, basically.
No,
then?
much more. Yeah,
Much longer?
probably 20. So I guess not much more, but as well, I was part of a kids singing group that we traveled and did
Right, I forgot about
stuff. Probably when I was 11.
Wow.
And then had probably led worship or something along that looked like leading worship, for the first time at probably age 12 or something like that. And yeah, and even before that, singing group was doing like a lot of kids musical stuff at our church and things like that when I was even younger than that, 10, 9, stuff like that. And so yeah, just very young, super young, just jumping up there and doing stuff from the earliest imaginable age. So
Yeah. So you've been at this for a long time. So one question, and for all transparency, Logan is also in our life group. Seth and I are in a life group with Logan. And so, we end up spending, a fair amount of time with each other and have been in this life group for like 3 years now, I guess, right?
Yeah, coming up on it.
Coming up on 3 years
yeah.
and going strong. And this is a question that I've had, but and I'm like, and you probably have had the same question for me. Like I have a general idea of what you do, but like, what do you do?
that's an incredible question. I mean, it's too hard to explain. You've probably never heard of it. That's my hipster answer. I'm just kidding. But,
That's a great answer.
one reason that it is hard to explain is because it has shifted. Essentially, the songwriting and what's called publishing, which is copyright ownership. That was a big part of what I was doing. My parents' business was basically that for years, and so I came along and joined them part-time, and then would gig and lead worship and all kinds of stuff, play guitar for people as a hired gun or country bands, things like that, for years. And essentially at some point we transitioned because that was not monetarily was not looking good for the future. You can kind of see ahead in music because everything's based on royalties. So you can just see how like things are doing now and how much money we'll be making in 3 years. And it just like you can see the trajectory. And so we transitioned to doing something we were pretty familiar with from the songwriting end because of Mom and her success in it. But essentially evangelical choir and orchestra music. So if you've ever been to like a big Baptist church where there's like, or even a small Baptist church too, where there's a choir on the stage and there's like 30 people in it, or a choir on the stage where there's 200 people in it and an orchestra, they get that music and they get those songs from somewhere and they pay money to do it. And so essentially what we do is we write and arrange and orchestrate, produce and put out songs, and we put them all on the internet, and churches buy them directly from us, and we even ship it out and do all, like it's a one-stop shop kind of a thing. Not a lot of contracting labor, so very busy. But essentially what I'm doing is all of the above. And so the reason it's hard to explain what I do is because there will be days where I'm just putting stuff on our website. Or like making videos to display the song. Something like that, where the sheet music scrolls past and you're like hearing the music. But there's other days where I'm recording an orchestra, or I'm recording a drummer, which I did this past week, or 2 days this week, I just played bass all day because I do the guitars and stuff on our tracks, and or we have a choir and I'm in the choir, and so I'm singing all day, or something like that, or I'm just sitting there putting dots on the page because I'm the arranger and orchestrator. So I'm writing out what the strings are supposed to do, or something like that, or it's a songwriting day. We're writing. And so there's a lot of admin, there's accounting things that go into that. And so essentially that's the gist of what I do is we're from start to finish, we're creating songs for church worship in choir and orchestra.
Got it. So farm to table for church
farm
music.
to table. That's the best way to put it. Farm to table, evangelical choir and orchestra.
Tremendous.
Music. Yeah.
Absolutely tremendous. I mean, that certainly can ring a bell for all the homesteaders in the area. They would love that. Okay, so with that's tremendous. So you are writing new stuff.
Yes.
Regularly.
Yes.
So here's a question. Why does the church need new songs for its worship?
Yeah, let me pull up. I was up at the middle of the night.
When the best songwriting is done?
Yes. And so I was thinking about the fact that we were going to do this today, and I wrote down a few things. And so first of all, the Bible tells us to sing new songs. And some people can try to maybe interpret that away. And so you've got like Psalm 98:1, like sing a new song, for the Lord has done marvelous things. Mm-hmm. But then there's Psalm 96:1, Isaiah 42:10, they basically say the exact same thing. Yeah. And you could kind of theorize that and say like, oh, what that means is like, it's a fresh song from your heart, like praising him for fresh mercies. That is probably using the same old songs, but is a fresh perspective, or something like that. And I think there's some truth to that. Yeah. But it seems hard to just explain away that really we are to write new songs. I mean, and the church, the other reason that, that's the first reason is the Bible, but the second reason is that interpretation of these verses is not new. And so the church has always written songs. Yeah. And so like every night we eat dinner at my house and we light like a little candle, and one of the boys will say, "Oh, gladsome light." I don't know if y'all know that one, but it's an Our Trinity hymnal. Yeah. But it's every night in the evening office in the Book of Common Prayer, and it's one of the oldest songs in the history of the church. I mean, it's literally, 2nd century possibly. Here at Zion, we used to do the Gloria Patri quite a bit, and you'll see that in other, even in Presbyterian prayer books and everything else. The Gloria Patri is a Trinitarian doxology that is super old, maybe. I mean, you would know this better than me. Maybe 1st century. I mean,
potentially, yeah.
Yeah, it's like extremely old, and so neither of those are in the Bible, like word for word. Obviously, these are scriptural concepts that are being reorganized, and essentially, it's like our thoughts come from the Bible, but we can sometimes reorganize things in rhyme or reorganize them musically in such a way that makes people see it from a new perspective. And so and then the third reason is we sing our own praise to God through writing new songs. And then I don't want to leave out either that it's a service to other people. Yeah. And so the reason that we write new songs and share them with other people is not so we can perform or anything like that, but it's sometimes to give people words to say that they want to say but don't quite have the words to do. And then hopefully we're also setting this to beautiful music as well. And music, I think, is one of the most best apologetic arguments for God, because there's really no pragmatic purpose for it at all. So, like in our secular world, it's like everything they look at, it's like, oh, here's the human body, and the reason that we have this bone is because 1 billion years ago humans needed this bone, and then it's like everything is just like explained through some pragmatic whatever, and it's just like, well, what about music? It's like we don't need this, we don't need it at all. And yet we all do it and we all love it. And people's reaction to it is really astounding. I mean, having been in so many musical environments for decades now, since I was a little kid, I've just seen some weird stuff. And just what people do with music is amazing. And it's just like, why does this happen? If you really just sat back and thought why, I think that God is going to be at the center of that answer.
That's fantastic.
I have a question just on like the service, because I love that that's one of the things that you drew out there. But like when you're writing, how do you approach that? Because you've written, and this is kind of a two-pronged question. How do you approach that? Like, are you thinking, what is a theme that I want to dig on?
Yes.
What are these things? And then also, you've written for different contexts, because you've written more hymnody kind of songs. You've written, more modern worship songs. And then obviously, I one of the first times we ever hung out, you were like, yeah, I have a number 2 song on the Southern Gospel charts right now. And so like you've written this kind of wide variety of songs. So can you kind of explain like what kind of goes through your head when you're writing for a specific audience, like a modern worship song versus maybe a Southern Gospel song, and like how are you kind of approaching that?
So, it's a little more. It's not a hyper spiritual answer. I'll just put it that way. Like at the end of the day, you're really just thinking about, and I don't want to make it too pragmatic, because you're not letting go of any of your truth. You're not letting your truth of any of God's truth, but you're not letting go of any of your convictions or anything like that. You're still writing as biblical of truth as you possibly can. Yeah. But there are different styles and there's different contexts, and there are times where you're just going to be like, they're going to love this, man. They're just going to eat this up. And you just need to step back out of it and be like, this context loves this. And no matter how much you think you're immune to that, you're not. Everyone has their own presuppositions, and there are things that just like are being targeted to you, and it just works. Yeah. Like I'm sure, Keaton, if you saw a banner ad for like a new Banner of Truth Puritan box set, you just be like
foaming at the mouth.
Yeah, you're foaming at the mouth. And it's just like, well, what was wrong with the paperbacks? And it's like, well, nothing except that these are way better. Yeah. And it's like, I think that we all have our built-in backgrounds, our built-in preferences. And so on some level, you're just bringing God's truth to those unique contexts. So hold on real quick. Yeah, and this is somewhat related to your question. So I had why write, but also why not to write. And this is actually pretty countercultural. So one issue that a lot of people I've met over the years doing music who are songwriters, they have, I heard this phrase this week and I absolutely loved it, is a main character complex.
Oh, yes.
Where I guess narcissism would be like another term, but essentially people write because they just feel like people should be paying attention to what they're doing, and people think that that everyone should just be listening to what they're sharing, and it's just like, no, that's not why we write. And then another reason is like if you can't imagine, like people will say like, I have to write because I can't imagine myself doing anything else. If you can't imagine yourself doing anything else, you probably shouldn't write. Like you probably should stop and take a step back and maybe like dig a ditch, or something like that, and get some perspective, because it's just like, maybe be grateful for the opportunity, or, and then it's not about self-expression. So we express a message, and that message is about another person, and it's not about us. So one time I played a song that I had written. I was like a teenager, and I'd written this Christian song, and I brought my guitar to like a family thing that Lexi's family was doing, and she has an uncle who's like an atheist. I think he's atheist. I've been told he is, but he's never like looked at me and been like, I'm an atheist, but I played the song because we were playing around, and Lexi's mom asked me to, or something like that. And he was like, wow, thank you for sharing that. It's really cool to see you be able to like express yourself that way through music. And I just want to push back on that and be like, I'm not expressing myself. I hope that I'm expressing the message of another person. And I think that's one reason why I feel honored to be able to write about God and to be able to write Christian music, because it's not Christian music in quotes like the genre on the radio. It's just like music that talks about God. And I even talking to some country writer friends I have that were really successful, there's little ways in which I feel bad for what they have to deal with every day, where it's like they have to go in and kind of do the same thing I'm doing, which is target certain contexts, but deep down they know like there's not that much theological depth to what they've written. And I think maybe somewhere inside they wish, if they're a believer, they wish that they had, or they wish that they could, Yeah. And so I feel honored to be a part of it at all.
There's such an interesting correlation hearing the way that you talk about songwriting and hearing the way that Keaton talks about preaching.
Yeah.
Because obviously they're different disciplines in like how you're writing and like how you're coming up with it. But as far as presentation, we've talked about this before. I can't remember if we talked about it on the podcast or off, but you've talked about how like when you're preaching to different contexts, if you're preaching to the students at the high school, it's different than how you're preaching to Zion versus when you've like filled in for your dad at his church. Like that, it's just different contexts require different emphases, different styles, different all of these things. Not that the fundamental truth doesn't change. Like what you're saying, Logan, with like writing a Southern gospel song versus a Reformed hymn. It's like the foundational truth of who God is and what you're trying to say doesn't change, but how you're saying it in order to properly communicate it does, which I find really interesting, the connection there.
Yeah.
Particular to you, kind of thinking on that, what part has music really played for your Christian life?
So it has enhanced it in many ways and pulled away from it in other ways. I think there are ways in which the music can be, depending on the environment, it can be dangerous. And we see that in the Bible. I think most musicians who really love their Bibles pay close attention to the music moments in the Bible. And so there are times where very like non-seminary trained or theologically educated music people who have done Christian music their whole life will often be able to tell you more about what role music plays in the Bible than a lot of highly educated pastors, just because that's all they pay attention to when they read the Bible. And so they've written a paper about it in their head, but like Lucifer, has been like thought of as the song leader of heaven. And to where it's like, that's something I think that plays a role where pride can really come in, and that makes music, it can be scary, where you can make it all about you. And there's times I think where that can be encouraged in certain even Christian contexts, and even times when something maybe that I've done musically has been attributed to like, oh, the Holy Spirit, and you don't want to say like, oh, it's not the Holy Spirit, because the Holy Spirit, I think you see this with David and his harp playing and things like that. He works through music, but at the same time, you're going to see moments of manipulation that people use, and I've definitely been there for those, and they really can hurt your faith, I think, over time, where you start to wonder, like, is any of this real? Because look at how much manipulation can take place. And but in terms of strengthening the faith, a lot of people like to rag on some of the big worship things, Hillsong or whoever it is. But what they don't realize is that a lot of their songs are pretty good, and actually they're probably a lot better than the preaching in a lot of those contexts. And so there are times where you're in a context and it's those songs that are the number one thing that you can even hold on to. Like you'll sit through a whole service and been like, most of this was not from the Bible, but man, that song was. And so if you're sitting there and kind of trying to chew the meat and spit out the bones, sometimes the meat is in those songs. And so yeah, music has played a role in as a temptation in my life, but it has also played a role in keeping me, I think. And then there are just times truly when you're communing with the Lord where it's like song is really the only way to, you know, even just singing in the shower or whatever it is, whether it's an original song or a song that's that you know.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just the only way that you can think of to say thank you to God. I think that's what ultimately what He wants us to do with music.
Totally, absolutely. So on that note, and you kind of touched on this just a little bit, but what part should music play in the life of the church?
So the largest book of the Bible is all songs.
Yeah,
and I think that tells us something. It just tells us that our response is uniquely musical to what God has done for us. And I remember when COVID first broke out, the elders here at Zion, we weren't even members here yet or anything like that, but we were on the email list and things like that. And so we were getting some of the inside of what was going on. And they were trying to figure out, how are we going to do this? How are we going to meet? And the CDC was saying like, okay, y'all can meet, but don't sing and all this kind of stuff. And I remember this email coming from Paul that's basically said, we're going to meet in the gym. We're going to socially distance. We're going to wear masks. We're going to do all of this stuff because we must sing.
Yeah.
Is what it said.
Yeah.
He's like, they're telling us not to sing. We consider that a non-negotiable. And, I thought that was really important. It's kind of burned into my head where it's just like the role that it plays in the church is very central, very responsive. It is part of what we do as a church body. And so I didn't write this down, but something I think that is missing in the life of the church. And this is one reason I like doing choir stuff, because it is a way of doing this.
Yeah.
But a lot of people today, they want to write, they talk about congregational singing or things like that. And so it's like, let's write melodies in a very small range for congregational singing's sake, or let's not do this or not do that because congregational. And certainly it's a service and we need to really be thinking about that. And I think about it every day. But there's another side of that coin too, where it's like you could bring the music to people's abilities, or you could bring people's abilities to the music. And so I think one thing we're really missing in the modern context that has shifted even since I was a kid is just teaching people to sing.
Yeah.
Not just telling them you should sing and that's what teaching is, but teaching them how. Teaching them how to read notes on a page, teaching them how to learn a part, teaching them about timing and rhythm. That's something my family, I'm really thankful for, has done even in the Southern gospel world. It's kind of a mid-century, early century thing called singing schools they would do in the Southern gospel world. And my family all ran singing schools like up in the mountains and stuff. And they would just teach people to read shape notes, like they do in Church of Christ, although we aren't Church of Christ, but that also was in gospel music as well. So that's all just a way of teaching. And you can, if you ever end up going to a church where that's kind of deep in the blood and in the culture, you'll hear how much louder people sing. People sing loud if they are a little bit more confident. And sometimes that comes down to whether their church taught them how. So yeah, I think it plays, and the songs, the lyrics you use to teach it to people are exactly that they're working their way into people's heads as truth that they can hold on to in certain times.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, and I want to commend you because by the time people hear this, yesterday, which is 3 days from now for us recording this, but yesterday, the kids choir would have performed for the first time.
Yes.
Right.
Not performed, but
Yes.
led worship. So it's like that you're doing that.
Yeah,
And so it's
right.
one of the things that I find really great about you just as a person is that like you're living that out. Like you're saying like, yeah, no, this is important and I'm going to do something about it. And I appreciate that.
For sure. Absolutely.
Those kids are great. If any of y'all are parents to those kids, we love your kids. They're super fun. They're kind of crazy.
That's right.
But
That's right.
they're all good kids.
We love our Zion kids. Yeah, they are. They're the best kids.
So I think a lot of people, there's so much music out there now, especially with like streaming and stuff. Who are some people that you're like, this is like a representation of like what I think is good? Because you are so deep into this world.
Question.
I'm gonna vamp for a little bit while you think. But like, you're so deep into this world. You know it so well, both from all aspects of it. And so when you're thinking, obviously, I think the Zion community is probably really familiar with like Indelible Grace and Sandra McCracken and the Ben Shive, like all of that stuff, which is great. And I love all that stuff. But maybe something that people wouldn't necessarily consider, that maybe like what you were saying was like, actually, no, there's some good stuff out here.
Yeah. Wow. So really anyone that I would commend would be anyone who's really holding on to the most scriptural truth and the best musical excellency within their context.
Yeah.
And so it's like if you were like Southern gospel, or something like that, I would be like, you need to listen to the Inspirations or like the Mylan Hayes family or somebody like that who they're just like they actually do care somewhat about the songs that they're singing, and they're really good singers, and the music in their context is like very specific, hyper specific context, but is so good in that genre or in that thing, so it's like in that like Reformed hymnody world, I think almost everybody would just be like, oh well, the Gettys, and I mean, don't take them for granted. They're good, and I think that's why. And so I would commend them for sure, in our context when it comes to like broader worship, like Big Eva as they call it. Man, like don't write off certain groups of people and the songs that they can come out with. I mean, there are some Hillsong songs that are so good that we could sing them here, and I think people would absolutely love them. And there are people even within that world who you wouldn't expect, but it's like you would expect to come to Zion and hear people be a fan of like Rich Mullins.
Yeah.
But you wouldn't expect, I was working at a conference once that Brooke Lidgetwood, or Brooke Fraser was at, and she's like the face of Hillsong, and just sitting there talking about how like she can't wait to talk to Rich Mullins in heaven. And how impactful he's been on her songwriting. And then you hear songs that she's written, like Lead Me to the Cross.
Yeah.
And it's just like, man, these are great songs. Like these are like really good songs. And so yeah, anyone who has just the a musical and lyrical ability, and this includes secular as well. I mean, I talked to Seth a little bit about this on Sunday, but if someone were to hack my Spotify, they would be like, what in the world is wrong with this person? Like, what in the world do they listen to? It's literally going from like bluegrass to like mid-2000s hip hop to anime soundtracks. And it's just like, what is the common thread here? And most of it's just, is it something that makes me astounded by the beauty of it? And me hear it and think, is that is that like something I could do? And if the answer is like absolutely not, then I'm really interested in listening to it. And so, because if I could do it, I will just do it. I don't need to listen to you do it, you know?
Yeah.
So I wrote this. This is somewhat related to your question, but I wrote this pros and cons list of basically the good things and the pitfalls about the context that we're in.
Yeah.
Which is kind of reformed hymnody.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so like one of them, I think that everybody would recognize right away is just lyrical density. If you come here to Zion, you'll notice like a lot of the songs we sing here are just, they're not only lyrically weighty in terms of like they have a lot of deep meaning, but the literal density of the lyrics, meaning like how many lyrics there are for the music, like how little space there is musically, and how much space there is lyrically. It's very dense, and I think that's a positive trait. I listen to a lot of music that has low lyrical density, sometimes just straight up instrumental music, and but I think that especially in our context right now, pop music has a lot of lyric to it. It's just like lyric, and I think people are used to that. And I think that's actually helpful in our context. And then when those lyrics are true and good and beautiful, then I think that that's a majorly positive trait. And they're doctrinally sound. I think that's what everybody is attracted to about when they hear a song like In Christ Alone or something like that. I think that's like the go-to, everyone champions, you know, this song because it's a big hit. But I think the reason that song is a big hit and songs like it is because they're grounded in the past. And so that would be the third pro here, is that like most people, the first time they heard In Christ Alone, thought they had already heard it.
I
think that's I talked to a guy who, he's probably 3 years older than me, and we were planning my brother's funeral, and we wanted In Christ Alone to be sung at it. He's like the funeral home director. And we were like talking about the copyright or something like that. And I was like, yeah, I think it was written like 2005 or something like that. And he like stopped everything and looked at me. He was like, In Christ Alone was written in 2005? I was like, yeah, something like that. And he was like, what? He thought it was like hundreds and hundreds of years old. And I've had at least 3 or 4 people ask me like, man, how old is that one? That's an old one, right? And it's just like, nope, that's a brand new song. And I think that's kind of the cool thing about it, is as soon as people heard it, they thought they'd already heard it before. There's pop songs like that too, where it's like you just think it's from the 70s or something, and you're just like, nope, it's a brand new song. And those just catch on really well. So just being grounded in church history, being grounded in psalm singing is big in the Reformed hymn world, and I think that's healthy. I think that's good. And then old hymns as well. We sing a lot of old hymns. So all of those I think are really helpful. They have some depth to them. They've been thought through. They've been time tested. Some pitfalls in this context, I think some cons would be maybe the exclusion of beauty over the idea of it. So it's like, we like psalm singing. We think psalm singing should be done. So we're going to sing this one even though the lyrics sound like Yoda wrote them. Or even though the melody is really weird, you know, or something like that. And it's just like, I'm not sure that's helpful. That's just my two cents. I'm not sure that works. That can happen in hymns as well. It's just like, we're going to sing this song because it has good gospel truth. And it's just like, yeah, but it's terrible. It's a terrible song. Something like that.
There was another guy in church history who did the same thing and then changed everything. And his name was Isaac Watts.
Yeah, exactly.
He's like singing at church. He's like, man, these are awful.
Yes.
Like, we love the Psalms, but we feel like we're doing them a disgrace because they're like so poorly translated.
Yes.
What if we made it rhyme?
Yes.
Here's a thought.
What if we wrote new songs?
What if we wrote new songs and reworked the psalters so that they rhymed and wrote beautiful melodies together?
And it was highly controversial.
Oh, massively.
I mean,
massively. It took like 3 generations before people were like, hey, we actually sing Isaac Watts. It was the edgy thing like 3 generations later.
Yeah. And one healthy thing about the way he did it was he wrote like one hymn for like every week, and they would just kind of do it to an old tune or something.
Yeah.
And he just stayed in his own context, in his own church, and just didn't make every song one of his original songs. Just like he would slowly, introduce one thing for this service, and just that slow plotting in his own context, doing a service to his own people to minister to them pastorally, completely changed modern church music. And I think that's incredible. So another pitfall would be predictability. So this goes back to what I said earlier about contexts, but like where you're not immune to certain things. So it's like I've been in right when we target to certain audiences, it's like if you're writing for Reformed hymnody, you don't say Jesus, you say Christ. You use because they're like, oh, Christ sounds like something Paul would say, and we like Paul's theology. So there's just things like that, or even the reason In Christ Alone is so like, because it also uses the word alone. So it's just like, we have the solas now, and we have Christ, and it's just like, it's all like, just if you say Jesus, it's like, oh, well, that's charismatic, you know what I mean, or something like that.
Oh,
it's like,
no. using his casual name.
Yeah, right, exactly. It's like we can't call. It's like if you say the word gospel, like they really like that, So it's like none of us are immune to just that, and I think that can be kind of a pitfall where we think of maybe more highly of ourselves, but maybe are victims to the same thing that everybody else is. And then the third con would be branding, which kind of goes right along with the same stream, where it's like I hate the idea that good biblical truth has to be tied to just a certain vibe. It's like, well, as long as we're all crunchy and our wives wear linen dresses and we like these types of singers and we all watch Lord of the Rings, then and
that's
then
proper theology, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's like I just feel like I know a lot of people who don't like any of those things, but it's like, but those people also deserve to know that they can have assurance of their salvation.
That's right.
Or maybe they don't deserve to know it. They just get to know it because God deserves all the praise. But they should know it. And I think that we can get pretentious. I think that would be one of the cons.
Yeah.
So
yeah. So this is a little off script, but do you have any like church music hot takes that you want to share?
We can cut out anything that you don't want us to.
Man,
if you feel like I mean, I know that you having a hot take is not like a difficult thing for you.
No.
Like, I know that you really enjoy
it. But it's on mic, it's a difficult.
But on mic,
That's
if
why
you
I
want me
threw
to
it
cut
out
something,
there.
we can.
Oh man. Okay, here's my biggest hot take ever.
Oh yes.
And people are gonna freak out. I don't think that reckless love is that bad.
Okay. Okay.
So people in our context specifically would be like, how dare you? Because God planned all this out from the start, so it's not careless or thoughtless, or here's all these synonyms with the word reckless. But synonyms and definitions are a little bit different from each other. And so if you just go to the thesaurus and you're like, look at these words that are quote unquote synonyms with the word reckless, but it's not technically the definition. And there are even some of the first definitions in Webster's are going to also be a description of what God did for us that are not true. And I understand that. But here's this is the hot take.
Let's hear it.
That the word reckless maybe has a unique connotation to it that basically means, to me at least, lack of concern for your own self-preservation. And so I think that the cross looks like that in some ways. Maybe not every way, and maybe it's not the best song in the world to sing, and I think it's kind of faded out of popularity anyway.
Yeah.
Right. But there is a line in Lord of the Rings where
there you go.
Theoden, okay, right? There's this berserker who is an Uruk-hai. Okay, this is how nerdy I am about Lord of the Rings. There's an Uruk-hai, which is a big old orc that's been like beefed up essentially on steroids, and he runs in with this like lighter, this big sparkler thing to light a bomb under the wall. And he's getting shot with arrows the whole way there. And then at the end of it, he's going to blow himself up just so he can blow up this wall.
Yeah.
And he's just not stopping. Legolas is just shooting him. And he's just like making it all the way through. And then he jumps in and blows up the wall. And Theoden says about this attack, he said, "What can men do against such reckless hate?" And again, we could quabble about the definition of the word, but if there is a reckless hate, like, is there such thing as a reckless love? And would it be something maybe like that berserker, where it just like ran through all obstacle to just endured the cross, despised the shame, you know? And so, no, we probably won't be singing that at Zion. But that's my hot take. That's my hot take.
That is your hot take.
I think it... that a lot of the people who do like the song are not coming at it from a place of just complete ignorance or something like that, that actually they are really thankful to Jesus for what he's done for them.
There you go. Okay. And we asked for it. So
you asked for it.
We asked for the hot take, and there's his hot take. Well, thank you for sharing that hot take. And thank you for sharing everything else. This has been fantastic. It's a privilege to know you. You're a gift to this church, you and Lexi and the boys. And we love you all a lot and are glad you're here.
Love you too.
All right. Well, thank you. We'll be back again next week, where we will be interviewing another special guest. Three special guests this season. We're just riding high.
Who is it?
And who could it be? And then after that, we'll be doing a Q&A episode. So if you have questions, we already have questions. So you won't be the only person submitting a question.
We have like 3.
We have 3 questions. So which could carry us for a very long time, knowing me and Keaton. But we would love it if you would send us some more. Until then. You can send those to keaton.paul@pcazion.org.
Yeah.
And until next week.
There is a king who rules forever. All to him I pledge my faith. Without his love, I would be nothing, for I was made to sing his praise. And in this world of sin and sorrow, I long for peace to have its place. May Jesus come and have dominion.